Long ago, in a small and quiet village called Njokosi, life moved slowly and in a simple way. The village was not big. Houses were built with mud walls and grass roofs. Paths connected one home to another, and small farms surrounded the village. People knew each other very well. If something happened in one house, the whole village would hear about it before the day ended. Every morning, before the sun rose fully, people were already awake. Men prepared their tools and went to the farms. Women fetched water, cooked food, and cleaned the houses. Children either helped their parents or went to school if there was one nearby. During the day, the village was full of life. You could hear people talking, laughing, and calling each other from one place to another. Goats moved around freely. Chickens ran across the paths. Sometimes old men sat under a big tree, talking about past events and giving advice to younger people. But when evening came, everything slowly changed. The sun went down and the sky became dark. People returned home from the farms. Fires were lit for cooking. Families gathered together to eat and talk. And as the night grew deeper, the village became quiet. Very quiet. It was during these quiet nights that one important rule became more serious than anything else. In Njokosi, no man was allowed to walk outside at midnight without wearing a shirt. This was not just a simple suggestion. It was not advice that people could choose to follow or ignore. It was a rule that everyone was expected to obey without question. From young boys to old men, everyone knew it. If it was midnight, and you needed to step outside your house, your chest had to be covered. Even if you were only going a short distance. Even if you were in a hurry. Even if you thought no one would see you. You had to wear a shirt. The elders of the village were very serious about this rule. They spoke about it often, especially when teaching young boys who were growing into men. During the day, when people gathered under the big tree, the elders would sometimes call the boys and make them sit down. They would look at them carefully and say, "You are growing now. You must learn the rules of this village." The boys would sit quietly, some looking down, others trying to appear strong. Then the elders would continue. At night, especially at midnight, do not go outside without a shirt. This is not something to play with. Sometimes one boy would ask, "Why is it so serious?" Another might laugh quietly, thinking it was not important. But the elders would not laugh. They would speak slowly and clearly. The spirits of this village are always watching. They protect us, but they also punish those who break the rules. Those words were repeated again and again over the years. At night, people followed this rule with care. If someone needed to go outside, maybe to check on animals or go to the toilet, they would first take a shirt and wear it properly. Even if they were half asleep, they would not forget. You could hear a mother reminding her son, "Wear your shirt before you go out." Or a wife telling her husband, "Don't forget the rule." Visitors who came from other villages were also warned. If a visitor planned to stay the night, someone would tell them clearly, "Here in Njokosi we have rules. If you go outside at night, make sure you wear a shirt." Some visitors would be surprised. Is it really that serious? And the answer would always be, yes, very serious. There was also another part of the rule that everyone followed. If someone was already outside before midnight without a shirt, they were not allowed to remain like that. As midnight got closer, they had to go back inside, wear a shirt, and then come out again if they still needed to be outside. People did not try to find shortcuts. They did not try to be clever. They simply followed the rule as it was. This rule had been there for many generations. Even the oldest men in the village said, "We found this rule already in place when we were young." Parents passed it down to their children without changing anything. Mothers taught their sons while doing daily work. You would hear a mother say, "My son, listen carefully. Never go outside at night without a shirt." The child might ask, "Why, mother?" And she would answer simply, "Because the spirits will punish you." Fathers also spoke in a firm voice. A man who ignores rules brings trouble to himself. Respect what you are told. No one tried to explain too much. There were no long stories about the spirits. There were no examples given. But the warning was always clear. Women and girls did not find this rule difficult. They were used to dressing properly and rarely moved around at night. For them it was normal. But for boys it was sometimes hard. On hot nights, some boys liked to sit outside without shirts. They would talk, laugh, or just enjoy the cool air. Sometimes they complained, "This rule is too much. Nothing will happen. We have never seen these spirits." Even then, most of them still followed it. Deep inside there was fear. Not loud fear. Not something they spoke about openly, but a quiet fear that stayed in their hearts. As midnight approached each night, the village became even more silent. If you walked through Njokosi at that time, you would see almost nothing. No people moving around. No voices. Only darkness, broken by a few small lights from inside houses. The sound of insects filled the air. Sometimes a dog barked in the distance. Doors were closed tightly. Windows were shut. It was as if the whole village understood that midnight was not a time for mistakes. Still, there were always a few people who questioned the rule. During the day, when people gathered in small groups, you could hear quiet discussions. One person would say, "Why should something so small be forbidden?" Another would add, "It is just a shirt. What difference does it make?" Someone else might say, "We have never seen these spirits with our own eyes." But others would quickly stop them. "Do not speak like that. Just follow the rule." One day, a group of young men decided to ask the elders directly. They approached them with respect and said, "We follow the rules, but we want to understand. Why is this one so important?" The elders looked at them carefully. The leader of the elders, an old man with a calm but serious face, leaned on his stick and remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly. "Not everything is explained in many words." The young men listened. He continued, "Some rules are there to protect us. You do not need to see the danger to know it exists." One of the young men asked again, "But why this rule?" The old man took a deep breath and said, "Long ago, the spirits gave this rule to our people. Since then, we have followed it." There was silence. Then another young man asked, "And what happens if someone breaks it?" The old man looked directly at him. His voice became heavier. "Those who break it will pay the price." No one laughed. No one spoke again. The meeting ended quietly. Life in Njokosi continued as usual. People worked, ate, laughed, and lived together. But the rule remained strong, simple, clear, and always present in the minds of the people. Because in Njokosi, everyone believed one thing: some rules are not meant to be tested. Many years passed after the rule of Njokosi had been firmly established. Children were born, grew up, and became parents themselves. Life in the village continued in the same quiet and orderly way. Then one day a boy was born. His name was Sadie Bakery. First, there was nothing special about him. He was just like any other child in the village. He cried, played, and followed his mother everywhere when he was still young. His mother loved him very much. She raised him alone and tried her best to give him a good life. She worked hard every day, going to the farm, cooking, and taking care of the home. When Sadie was still small, she would carry him on her back while working. She would talk to him softly and say, "My son, you must grow up to be a good person. I don't have much, but I want you to have a better life." As he grew older, she continued to teach him. She would correct him when he did something wrong. She would warn him when he disrespected others. She would remind him of the rules of the village. Many times she told him, "Respect people. Do not take what is not yours. And never go outside at night without a shirt." At first, Sadie listened a little. Like most children, he would obey when his mother was watching. But as he grew older, his behavior began to change. He became stubborn. If his mother told him to do something, he would delay. If she warned him, he would ignore her. If she became serious, he would stay quiet for a moment, then go back to doing the same thing later. People in the village began to notice. They would say quietly, "That boy is becoming difficult. His mother is trying, but he does not listen." As Sadie entered his teenage years, his behavior became worse. He started spending more time outside the house. He stopped helping his mother with work. He began moving around with other boys who were known for bad behavior. These boys were not from Njokosi alone. Some came from nearby villages. They had no respect for rules and they liked trouble. They would sit together during the day, talking and laughing loudly. Sometimes they argued with others. Sometimes they fought among themselves. At night they moved quietly. They planned things in low voices. They watched people's houses. They looked for places where items were left outside. This was how Sadie slowly became a thief. First, it started with small things. He took a piece of cloth left on a line. Then a cooking pot from outside someone's house. Then a small stove. Each time he stole something, he felt no shame. Instead, he felt proud that he was not caught. He began to move more carefully. He learned how to walk without making noise. He learned how to watch before acting. He learned how to disappear quickly in the dark. Soon he was not stealing small things only. He began stealing mats, tools, and even food. Sometimes he went to farms at night and took maize. When people woke up and found their things missing, they were angry. They would gather and complain. Who is doing this? This is too much now. Some already suspected Sadie. They would say, "It must be that boy. He is always moving at night." But they had no proof. So instead they blamed his mother. They would speak to her with disappointment. "You have failed to control your son. Look at what he is doing to this village." His mother would feel pain when she heard those words. She would go home, call Sadie, and speak to him seriously. "My son, people are talking about you. Are you the one stealing from them?" Sadie would avoid her eyes and say, "No, mother. They are just blaming me." But deep inside she was not convinced. She tried again and again to correct him. One evening, she sat him down and said, "Listen to me carefully. Even if you hide from people, you cannot hide from what is right and wrong. Stop this behavior before it destroys you." Sadie did not answer. He just stood up and walked away. As time passed, his habits became stronger. By the time he reached the age of 20, Sadie was known by many as a thief, even if they could not catch him. He no longer feared moving at night. In fact, he preferred it. The night gave him freedom. People were asleep. The village was quiet. No one was watching. And because of this, he often walked outside after midnight. Many times he walked without wearing a shirt. Some villagers saw him from a distance and warned him, "Sadie, go back inside and wear a shirt." Others spoke to him during the day. "You are breaking the rule. Stop this before something bad happens." But Sadie always laughed. He would shake his head and say, "Those are old lies. There are no spirits here." Sometimes he spoke with confidence. "You people are afraid for nothing. I have walked like this many times. Nothing has happened to me." His friends supported him. They would laugh and say, "He is right. These are just stories to scare people." Sadie believed them. He believed that he was smarter than others. He believed that the rule did not apply to him. There was also another reason why he liked walking without a shirt. He once told his friends, "If I wear a shirt, people can recognize me. But without one in the dark, no one can tell who I am." He was dark-skinned and at night, he blended easily with the darkness. This made him feel safe. Also, he did not have many clothes. If someone noticed the clothes he wore during a theft, they might identify him the next day. So he chose to remove his shirt completely. To him it was a smart decision. To others it was dangerous. His mother continued to warn him. Almost every time he left the house at night, she would say, "Please, my son, wear your shirt." Sometimes she even begged, "I am afraid for you." But Sadie would respond carelessly, "Nothing will happen. Stop worrying." Then he would walk into the darkness, leaving his mother standing at the door, watching him disappear. Inside her heart, she felt something was not right. But no matter how much she tried, Sadie did not change. He continued his life the same way. Stubborn, careless, and full of confidence that nothing could harm him. He did not know that his choices were slowly leading him somewhere he could not escape. One night, when the village of Njokosi was deep in sleep, Sadie woke up quietly. It was around 2 in the morning. The night was still. There was no wind, no voices, no movement outside. Only the soft sound of insects could be heard in the darkness. Inside the small house, everything was silent. His mother was asleep. Sadie opened his eyes slowly and sat up on his bed. For a moment he stayed still, listening carefully. He wanted to be sure that no one was awake. After confirming that everything was quiet, he stood up gently. He did not make noise. He had done this many times before. He walked to a small container of water, bent down and washed his face. The cold water made him fully awake. Then he reached for a big empty sack that he had prepared earlier. He held it tightly in his hand. He did not take a shirt. Without thinking twice, he walked to the door, opened it slowly and stepped outside with his chest bare. The air outside was cool. The village was dark. Most houses had no light. Sadie looked around once, then started walking. His steps were careful and quiet. He avoided stepping on dry leaves. He moved like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. That night he had a plan. He was going to steal maize from Bibi Mwaju's farm. Bibi Mwaju was known by everyone in the village. She was old, and her face always looked serious, almost angry. She did not talk much, but when she did, people listened. A few months earlier, some young thieves had entered her farm and stolen many maize cobs. After that incident, she became even more strict. She had stood in the village and warned loudly, "Anyone who comes to my farm again will meet the spirits." Many people heard her warning and took it seriously. But Sadie did not. To him it was just another empty threat. As he walked through the dark path leading to the farm, he remembered her words and shook his head. "Old woman," he whispered to himself. "She is just trying to scare people." After some time he reached the edge of the farm. He stopped there and looked around carefully. The maize plant stood tall and still. There was no movement. He waited for his friends. They had planned to meet there and steal together. He stood in the darkness, holding the sack, listening for footsteps. Minutes passed. No one came. He became impatient. "Why are they late?" he said quietly. He waited a little longer. Still nothing. Then he made a decision. "I will start alone," he told himself. He stepped into the farm slowly. The maize leaves brushed softly against his body as he moved deeper inside. He bent down and began picking maize one by one. He worked calmly. There was no hurry. He believed that everyone in the village was asleep. Each time he picked a cob, he dropped it into the sack. The sound was soft and dull. He moved from one spot to another, choosing the best maize. He behaved like someone harvesting his own farm. After some time, the sack began to fill. Half of it was already full. Sadie paused for a moment, wiped his face, and looked around. Everything was still. Then suddenly, a deep voice spoke behind him. "Welcome to a new world." The voice was heavy. It was not loud, but it was clear. It sounded close. Sadie froze. His heart started beating fast. Slowly, he turned his head and looked behind him. There was no one. The maize plants were standing still. No movement. No sound. He stood there trying to understand what he had just heard. For a moment, fear entered his heart. But then he forced himself to relax. "Maybe my friends have arrived," he said quietly. "They are trying to scare me." He even tried to smile, but his face was tense. He moved a few steps, pushing aside the maize leaves, trying to see if someone was hiding. There was nothing. The silence returned. After a few seconds, he shook his head and said, "This is nothing." He went back to his work and continued picking maize. But now his movements were slower. His ears were alert. He was listening carefully to every small sound. Then, without warning, he felt something. A hand touched his shoulder. It was clear, cold, real. Sadie jumped and turned quickly. There was no one. Now his body began to shake. He looked around again, this time with real fear. His breathing became heavy. "Who is there?" he whispered. No answer. Only silence. The fear inside him grew stronger. He could no longer ignore it. He decided to stop. "I need to leave," he said to himself. He quickly bent down and grabbed the sack. But when he tried to lift it, something was wrong. It was too heavy. Much heavier than before. He struggled using both hands. But the sack would not move. His face showed confusion. "What is this?" he said, breathing hard. He dropped the sack and opened it. He looked inside carefully. There was nothing unusual. Only maize. No stones. No extra weight. Still, the sack felt impossible to carry. Now fear took full control. Sadie stepped back slowly. "This is not normal," he said in a low voice. He decided to leave everything and run. He turned his body ready to escape. But the moment he tried to move, something grabbed him from behind. He felt it clearly. A strong force pulling him back. He struggled. He pushed forward with all his strength, but his legs became weak. It was as if his body was no longer under his control. He tried to run again, but suddenly everything went dark. He could not see, not even a little. His eyes were open, but there was nothing, only darkness. His heart raced with fear. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He tried again. Nothing. It felt like his throat was closed, like his voice had been taken away. Tears started forming in his eyes. He fell to the ground. His hands touched the soil as he tried to hold himself up. Inside he was crying, but outside there was no sound. His body shook with fear. For the first time, Sadie understood that he was not in control anymore. Then in the silence, the same voice spoke again. Clear. Close. Unavoidable. You belong to the world of darkness now. This will be your home forever. Sadie lay on the ground, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to see. And in that moment, everything he had believed, everything he had laughed at, became real. Morning slowly arrived in the village of Njokosi. The darkness of the night began to disappear little by little as the sun started rising from far away behind the trees. Roosters crowed from different houses. Women woke up to begin their morning work. Smoke slowly rose from cooking fires. Inside her small house, Sadie's mother also woke up. Like every morning, she stretched her body slowly before standing up. She tied her cloth properly and prepared herself to begin the day. At first, everything seemed normal. She moved quietly around the house, arranging a few things before waking her son. Even though Sadie often returned late at night, he usually slept heavily in the morning. His mother was used to waking him up many times before he finally stood from bed. As she walked toward his room, she called out in a tired but calm voice, "Sadie, wake up, my son." There was no answer. She waited a few seconds and called again, this time louder. "Sadie." Still nothing. She frowned slightly. Usually, even if he was sleepy, he would at least make some sound or complain. She moved closer to the door. Then she noticed something strange. The door was not locked. She stopped for a moment. Sadie always locked his door. If he was inside, he locked it from within. If he went outside, he locked it from outside. He never left it open. His mother stared at the door quietly, feeling a sudden discomfort inside her chest. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The room was quiet. Very quiet. At first, she saw Sadie lying on the bed. His chest was bare. The blanket was pushed aside carelessly. Under the bed, she noticed a sack. Part of it was visible from below. She bent slightly and realized it was half filled with maize. Confusion entered her mind immediately. Where did this maize come from? She wondered. But before thinking more about the sack, she focused on her son. "Sadie," she called again softly. No answer. She walked closer to the bed. He was lying still. Too still. She touched his shoulder gently. Nothing. She shook him harder. "Sadie, wake up." Still nothing. Fear slowly entered her heart. She grabbed him again and shook him with more force. His body moved lifelessly. That was when she noticed something terrible. He was not breathing. Her eyes widened with shock. For a moment her mind refused to believe it. She touched his chest. Nothing. She held his face. Cold. Her body began shaking. Then suddenly a loud cry burst from her mouth. "Ah! My son!" Her scream filled the morning air. She cried loudly and helplessly. Neighbors heard her immediately. People rushed from different directions toward the house. Women arrived first. What happened? Why is she crying? Then they entered the room and saw Sadie lying motionless on the bed. His chest was bare. The sack of maize was still under the bed. Everyone became silent. Some covered their mouths with fear. Others stepped back slowly. One woman whispered, "He is dead." Sadie's mother continued crying loudly beside the bed. "Wake up, my son. Please wake up." But Sadie did not move. More villagers gathered outside the house. People spoke in low voices. What happened to him? Was he sick? How did this happen? Then someone noticed the sack of maize. Another person immediately said, "This maize looks freshly picked." Others exchanged worried looks. Because the situation looked strange, the villagers decided to call the elders. After some time, the elders arrived at the house. They entered the room slowly and examined everything carefully. They looked at Sadie's body. They looked at the maize sack. They looked at his bare chest. The room remained silent as they observed. Then one elder spoke quietly. Something happened during the night. The elders stepped outside and discussed among themselves. After that, they decided to check the nearby farms. A small group of villagers followed them. They moved from one farm to another, searching carefully. Finally, when they reached Bibi Mwaju's farm, they saw signs clearly showing that maize had been stolen during the night. Some maize stalks were broken. Fresh footprints could still be seen on the soil. The elders looked at each other seriously. One of them said, "This happened recently." They sent someone to call Bibi Mwaju. After a short time, the old woman arrived slowly, holding her walking stick. Her face looked as serious as always. One elder asked her directly, "Bibi Mwaju, do you know anything about what happened last night?" The old woman looked confused. "What happened?" Another elder replied, "Sadie is dead. It seems maize was stolen from your farm during the night." Bibi Mwaju remained quiet for a few seconds. Then she shook her head slowly and said, "I don't know anything. I was asleep." The elders watched her carefully, but she did not add anything else. After that, everyone returned to the village. Later that day, the elders gathered for a long meeting under the big tree. People from the village also came and sat nearby, waiting to hear the decision. The elders spoke quietly among themselves for a long time. Some looked serious. Others shook their heads slowly. Finally, the leader of the elders stood up. The crowd became silent immediately. Then he spoke. "Sadie went to steal maize from Bibi Mwaju's farm during the night." Nobody interrupted him. He continued. "He broke the rule of the village. He walked outside after midnight without wearing a shirt." The villagers listened quietly. Then the elder finished by saying, "The spirits punished him." A heavy silence followed those words. No one argued. No one questioned the decision. Many people lowered their heads quietly. Others remembered all the times Sadie had laughed at the village rule. Some women whispered softly. "He was warned many times." Sadie's mother sat silently, crying with pain. Deep inside, she remembered every warning she had given her son. But now it was too late. That same evening, the villagers prepared for Sadie's burial. The sun was already beginning to go down. People gathered quietly. There was no laughter. No noise. Only sadness and fear. Sadie was buried before night fully arrived. After the burial, villagers slowly returned to their homes. For some days, people continued talking about what had happened. Children became more afraid of moving outside at night. Young men avoided walking shirtless after dark. Whenever someone mentioned Sadie's name, people spoke in low voices. But as time passed, life slowly returned to normal. People went back to their farms. Children played again. Families continued with daily life. And after a few weeks, most villagers slowly forgot about Sadie. After the death of Sadie, life in Jokosi slowly returned to normal. At first, people talked about him every day. Groups gathered under trees discussing what had happened to him that night. Some said the spirits had punished him because he stole maize. Others believed he was punished because he walked outside after midnight without a shirt. Whenever young boys started laughing about the village rules, elders would quickly silence them. "Do not joke about such things," they would say. "Look at what happened to Sadie." But as days passed, the fear slowly became smaller. People returned to their daily lives. Farmers went back to their farms. Children played again. Women gathered at the river to wash clothes and talk. Even Sadie's name stopped being mentioned often. Then, 2 months later, something else happened. Bibi Mwaju died suddenly. She had not been seriously sick. She was simply old, and her body had become weak with age. One morning, people heard the news spreading through the village. "Bibi Mwaju is dead." Villagers went to her house quietly. Some stood outside speaking in low voices. Others entered to comfort the family. Many people remembered how strict and feared she was. Some whispered, "She warned thieves many times." Others said, "Maybe she knew more than people thought." Still, no one openly accused her of anything. After her burial, her daughter Jane inherited the farm. Jane was very different from her mother. She spoke politely and treated people kindly. Soon after taking over the land, she planted new maize. The rains that season were good. The maize grew quickly. The stalks became tall and green. The cobs looked healthy and strong. People passing near the farm would stop and admire it. You could hear villagers saying, "Jane's maize is growing very well. This farm is blessed. Those crops look beautiful." Even people from nearby villages noticed the farm. At night, the maize field stood tall under the darkness, moving softly when the wind passed through. Months earlier, people feared that place because of Sadie's death. But now slowly fear had faded. Then one night, another young man made a dangerous decision. His name was James. Like many young men who wanted easy things, James decided to steal maize from Jane's farm. Late at night, when most people were asleep, he quietly carried a sack and walked toward the field. The night was cold and silent. James looked around carefully before entering the farm. At first, everything seemed normal. The maize leaves brushed against his body as he moved deeper inside. He bent down and started picking maize one by one. The sound of maize dropping into the sack was soft. James worked quickly but carefully. Then suddenly, he heard someone crying. The sound came from somewhere inside the darkness of the farm. The crying sounded painful, weak, like someone begging for mercy. Then he heard words clearly. "Please forgive me." James froze immediately. His hands stopped moving. He lifted his head slowly and listened carefully. The crying continued. "Please forgive me." Fear entered his heart. He looked around, but all he could see were tall maize plants and darkness. For a moment he thought maybe another thief was hiding nearby. But something about the voice felt wrong. It sounded full of suffering. James swallowed hard and tried to calm himself. Very slowly he started following the sound. Each step felt heavy. The deeper he moved into the farm, the more frightened he became. The crying became louder. Then suddenly, he saw someone standing between the maize plants. James stopped breathing for a moment. It was a man. The figure looked weak and frightening. Blood was flowing from the man's mouth. James stared carefully, and then his entire body became cold with fear. It was Sadie. His face looked pale and painful. His eyes looked empty. Blood continued dripping from his mouth as he cried softly. James could not believe what he was seeing. His hands began shaking violently. The sack fell from his hands onto the ground. For 1 second he remained frozen. Then fear completely took over him. Without saying a word, James turned and ran. He pushed through the maize plants carelessly. Branches hit his body as he escaped. He did not stop to pick the sack. He did not look behind him. All he wanted was to get away from that farm. He ran until he reached home, sweating heavily and breathing hard. That night he could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered Sadie's bloody face. The next morning James told people what he had seen. He gathered with other villagers and said nervously, "I saw Sadie last night in the maize farm." People looked at him with surprise. One man laughed. "Sadie is dead." Another person said, "You were probably drunk." James shook his head quickly. "No, I saw him clearly. Blood was coming from his mouth." But people did not believe him. Some laughed at him openly. Others said fear had confused his mind. James became frustrated. "I am telling the truth." But no matter how much he explained, nobody accepted his story. After some time, people stopped listening. They simply dismissed him and continued with their work. Then 2 nights later something else happened.